Radio Lewes. Local webcasting for a worldwide audience.
Hello, I'm Richard.
And I'm Matt.
In this show, we'll each select 5 tunes on a particular theme. And this week, it's album tracks. So it's the tracks that are hidden on albums that didn't become singles, but that we think are completely fantastic. And like as ever, there's quite a lot to choose from, isn't there?
Well, yes, there's ordinarily tens of songs. So, you know, how many songs do you have on an album which end up as singles? A couple. So what about all the rest of them that nobody ever talks about? It's been an interesting week, actually, selecting these.
But the thing is about LPs. I mean, so certainly most of the LPs that I've ever listened to is, okay, you've got your singles, your 2 or 3 singles, which are generally, you know, the catchiest things on there. And then you've got probably a couple of other really good ones that are fairly catchy that perhaps could have been singles. Then you've got, you know, a few medium ones and then a couple of duds. That's the sort of average. That's the average LP. Really good LPs are, you know, have a much higher average than that. But, you know, I still think, you know, that really good album tracks are still, you know, relatively rare things, you know, ones that you just think are really memorable. I still think they're kind of rarities, really.
Well, there are some bands that are better at albums than others. There are some bands which are purely singles bands, which is quite frustrating when you buy an album and most of it isn't very good. But I think what's come across in my list is that those bands that are sort of classically good with albums, there's a richness of stuff there to be dug into. And also I've managed to pull a few tracks of bands that I've really wanted to share and haven't had a chance to yet. So that's been quite fun too.
Oh, nice. Okay, well, let's get started. What's your first one?
So my first one is a band that I've shared before, but it's one of my favourite bands. It's Radiohead. And it's off A Moon-Shaped Pool, which is their most recent album, which is just chock full of corkers. There's not a bad track on that album at all. And it's one of their most instant albums for me, which is quite surprising. So long into a career which has been sort of remarkable by its experimentation. They really kind of nailed down just a really accessible album. But this one is The Numbers, and it's a big, lush, sort of dreamy tune that kind of carries you away on its strings. The thing for me about what I loved about Moon-Shaped Pool is that it's very strings heavy, and I'm quite a fan of strings in pop music. You know, I like kind of scale and grandiosity, and they don't really do that, but they do adding strings into the Radiohead sound gives it a sense of sort of humanity and romance, which is sometimes missing. And The Numbers has that in spades. I think it's a beautiful song.
I think the thing I love about this Radiohead LP is it's quite smooth. It goes down smooth, as as you might say, because it's, you know, it's just a really beautiful sounding record as well. I mean, most of their records are beautiful sounding, but they can be a bit jagged sometimes. Whereas A Moon-Shaped Pool, I think, is a very smooth sounding thing. It's a really beautiful thing to listen to, and I mean, like you say, you could almost pick any track from this whole LP, couldn't you, for something like this, because they're all brilliant tracks. There's no filler in there at all. Here we go then. Here's Radiohead.
Just like a phantom, the touch is like a breeze. There's this understanding. See the moon smiling. Open our channel, ready to receive. Swing out at the mercy. Every shimmer is a spell. Shimmers and spell.
Right, there we go. That was good. That was Radiohead. Numbers. Right, what's my first one? What shall I go? I know. We'll go. I'm going to go further back. I'm going to go back to. I think it's the 80s. No, it's probably the 90s actually. But it's the Cocteau Twins anyway, and it's from one of my favorite LPs, and I think it's probably one of your favorites as well. From Heaven or Las Vegas, which is just a massively amazing LP. And again, there isn't really a bad track on it, so it's quite easy to pick something from here. But the one I've chosen was the second track. I think it's Pitch the Baby, which is just ace. it's a song that's incredibly catchy. It does tons of different things in it, and it's something that I could just endlessly listen to. And again, it's on, if I had sort of like playlists, it's always on those, because it kind of just makes me happy. I've got absolutely no idea what it's about. I actually did Google it last year, I think, when I was very idle during lockdown. I Googled the lyrics, and someone had actually gone to the trouble of trying to write the lyrics for this song out, and it still didn't make an awful lot of sense, really. And you tried to actually follow the lyrics in the way that Liz Fraser sung them, and you still couldn't actually follow. It was still impossible to make any sense of it. But it's a brilliant record from a brilliant record.
It's almost sort of optimum Cocteau Twins, this song. It's all that's brilliant about them distilled into one tune. It's quite surprising it's not a single, actually, because it's a really great tune. And it's not one of their more abstract ones, although, you know, Liz Fraser does have a habit of being very abstract, as you say, in what she writes about. But I think, isn't this the first album that she actually wrote in English? Lots of either all of or a number of the previous albums had been in some sort of invented language. So I don't know if that kind of makes a difference to listen to it and makes it slightly more satisfying as an album. And this track is definitely a standout. It's great.
I almost prefer not to really know what she's singing. You know, you catch occasional words that you think, oh yeah, okay, that I know what that word is. But in a way, it would be really disappointing if you found that this kind of beautiful mesmeric singing was just narrating a shopping list or something, wouldn't it?
It could be. Maybe it is.
It could be. You know, 4 packs of talc and a couple of things of butter. No, I think it's not. Anyway, this is the Cocteau Twins and Pitch the Baby.
Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful stuff. That is the Cocteau Twins. Right, what do we got for number 2?
So I've not spoken about this man yet, which is a massive shame because I'm a huge fan. I only really kind of about 4 or 5 years ago suddenly started getting into Northern soul and then soul in general. And then obviously if you're listening to and sort of investigating soul as a medium or a genre, you're going to come across Al Green at some point. And I bought one of his albums. It might have been Gets Close to You was the album I bought first, and then I just bought his oldest albums on vinyl, basically. And this is on Full of Fire, and it's Glory, Glory. It's he became the famous Reverend Al Green not long after this album, when he rediscovered sort of God and became ordained and everything. And this is one of the first songs that really sort of flirts with religion, but does it in a way which isn't overt. And it's just it's a really great, happy, up soul tune, which has got all the sort of the hallmarks of Al Green, mostly his voice, which is just standout and just a beautiful, beautiful thing to listen to.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add about this. I mean, it's just ace. It's really fantastic. And it's also just really nice to hear, something a bit different in our selections because, we don't often go into sort of soul and things like that, but I know that we both love it. And I think, of all the stuff that we listen to over the years, I listen to lots of stuff like this, but it's never the sort of first thing that pops up into my head to put into one of the shows. So it's nice to have this kind of represented in one of the shows. So yeah, let's have it. This is Al Green. Good. We need to play more of this stuff. Maybe we will.
Yeah.
Okay. So my second one is a departure from Al Green, I think. And it's a band that I've wanted to play for ages both on this show and on my own show. And I still haven't actually done so apart from today. And it's Crowded House. So Crowded House, I just love them, and I didn't like them when they were really around properly. I thought they were kind of the sort of band for people who don't like music very much, like sort of Mondeo Man music. And I think it's just because they had that huge hit with Weather With You, and I think it was probably one of my housemates when I was at university was into them, and he annoyed me, so therefore I decided they weren't very good. But they're brilliant, and Neil Finn writes the most beautiful songs. And and this track I've picked is called Catherine Wheels, and it's from their LP Together Alone, which is probably the biggest LP they had. Actually, it had Distant Sun on it, and it's the LP after Woodface, which is the one which had Weather With You and all those ones. So they kind of took this very kind of clear trajectory upwards, and it sort of ended with this particular LP. And they did a couple of other sort of reforming LPs afterwards, but they never quite hit the heights of this LP. And again, there are several tracks from this and from their LP Woodface that I could have chosen. And I think I ended up playing this track or this LP on repeat when I was in Australia for a month. And this was in the days where I had a Discman. You only had CD players and didn't have any newfangled stuff of today. And I had I think it's about 6 CDs with me for the whole month. And this LP was one of them. And I didn't get bored of it. It's just a beautiful sounding LP. And this track, the reason I love this track so much is because it's got just this beautiful tune. I mean, it's just a really kind of it's just almost ethereal bits of it, the way that it works. But it's also a really complicated tune in that there are lots of different bits that happen, lots of different sections to the song, and it almost sort of changes direction about halfway through, and then sort of returns to the original song. But I don't know, I just absolutely love it, and I can never, this will never get boring for me, this tune.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a housemate who was into Crowded House and who was annoying as well, and I had a similar experience until I heard this album. And there's no escaping the fact that it's just consummate songwriting, and the whole album is great. They're deceptively complex, their songs, because when you listen to them, you say it sounds so it's very accessible and you can get into it very easily. But then when you really listen to them, you can hear all the sort of all the clever stuff that's going on, but it's not done in a way which is showing off. Yeah, it's great. It's a great collection of just really uplifting songs, and this is a standout, definitely.
So here we go. This is Crowded House and Catherine Wheels.
No night to stay in, bad moon is rising again, dice rolls, you burn, come down, I feel as that cold wheel turns, I know what I know, sad clothes been sleeping around to stroke the right nerve, whose needs do I serve as Catherine's wheel turns. She was always the first to say gone. She's got her Catherine wheels on, always the first to say gone. Go kindly with him to his blind apparition, whose face creases up with age gone grey. We'll be back here one day. She was always the first to say gone. She's got her Catherine wheels on, always the first to say gone. She's got her Catherine wheels on, wheels on. Catherine wheels. of life. He woke, tore the covers back, found he was empty inside. So they were told, when the moon would rise, the best time to leave with your soul. She's gone up towards the lights, watching her whole life unfold. Oh, bruises come up dark. His hold on her, regarded by some as his slave. He spoke as in a stranger's tongue, to spare us and drive you away. Hey, bruises come up dark.
Beautiful. What a tune. What a tune. So we're nearly halfway. What have you got for number 3?
The Beatles. I've not played a Beatles tune in this series. They may have heard of them, the Beatles. There were 3 of them, I think. Steve, Pinky, and Derek.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, remember those guys?
Yeah,
so this is Hey Bulldog, which is off the Yellow Submarine album. And it's the first Beatles song I remember hearing, because the Yellow Submarine, the film, was on at Christmas almost every year on BBC Two when I was a kid. And I was obsessed with it because it's just so weird and brilliant. But this was always my favorite sequence, Hey Bulldog. And it's always stuck with me. It's always one of those songs that I've carried with me. And it's a song that a lot of people who even Beatles fans don't seem to really know. And what I like about it is that it's just quite dirty. It's quite dirty, funky and rocky. It doesn't really sound like them. I mean, it sounds like that kind of period, sort of the Yellow Submarine period, where they were starting to just get a little bit more, a little dirtier with their sound and are not quite so well-mannered. And it's just a heads down kind of rock tune. And they all are obviously having a great time playing it, because there's lots of screaming and shouting and weird sounds going on in the background. And it was obviously just during a time when they were being very experimental with the way they recorded songs. This is just them in a room playing and playing loud. And it's great. It's great and noisy.
Yeah, I could have happily chosen this one in my collection for today as well. I love this one. It's one of my favourite Beatles tunes as well. And I don't know, it's just joyful, really. It's a bit psychedelic. It's a bit bombastic. It's a bit silly. It's all stuff that they kind of love doing. And I think the other thing is it's clearly sort of got it's clearly a John Lennon sort of song, but it's got a bit of kind of Paul McCartney stuff in it as well, some kind of good tunage in there as well. Yeah, it's just brilliant. And if you read the book, I don't know if you've read the book called Revolution in the Head, which is a kind of classic Beatles book. And it's basically every single Beatles song listed and sort of described and broken down and assessed by a kind of music critic. And this is one of the ones that he loves the most, the author of this book.
Oh, really?
So yeah, so I think we're not alone in our love of this particular tune.
And it's got a bass line that's been ripped off so many times. If you listen to this bass line, it's just a walking bass line, but it pops up in all sorts of places. It's great.
It's ace. All right then, here is the Beatles and Hey Bulldog. fabulous. I'll play it again if I had time. Hey Bulldog by the Beatles. That's brilliant. We might be hearing a bit more from them later on, possibly. You never know.
Well, they had a few tunes, didn't they?
They did have a couple. They're promising young act. Whatever happened to them?
Who knows?
So I'm going to go from the Beatles. We're going to take a bit of a U-turn, and we're going to come out somewhere, I think in kind of like the Highlands or somewhere sort of fairly bleak in Scotland, which is where the next band come from. They're not really a band; they're kind of a production team, I guess. And it's Boards of Canada, who are, for those who don't know, kind of what you would call, I guess you'd call them ambient music. That doesn't really kind of do them justice, I don't think. But
it's electronica, some people would call it.
Electronica, yeah.
Why people put the "a" on the end of electronic to come up with electronica.
They're a pair of Scottish gentlemen who make just beautiful sounding, electronica music. But it's very, I don't know how to call it. I've used the word ethereal before, but I mean it's a bit like that. And knowing that they're from Scotland, I do get a kind of a sense of Scotland from them somehow. I don't know why. And this is from their first sort of full LP called Music Has the Right to Children. And it is, I think for most people who listen to that LP, probably the standout track from it. And it's called Roib Give.
Are you sure you're pronouncing that right? Because who knows?
I've got absolutely no idea. I wish I just said, this is the LP. This is the great track, but it's only about 2 minutes long, and it's just, I've never heard anything like it in my life. In all my listening, I've never heard anything like it. And if you play somebody this LP, and it'll be this track that they pull out and go, "Oh, that was really beautiful," and it is. It's just beautiful, and I can't really describe it. We'll just have to play it. But it's one of those things that is just kind of mesmerizingly beautiful, and it sort of, I don't know, it just sort of plods along in its own little way. It's just like a weird little creature that's somehow very, very cute and beautiful. That's how I see it. I don't really know how else to describe it, but the whole LP is a brilliant LP. I mean, they're one of those bands that we haven't played anything of yet, and all of their LPs are really good. I mean, this is a particularly good one, but this is for me the standout track of all their stuff. And again, they didn't do singles, so it's quite convenient that I can select any of their tunes. But yeah, this is just my favorite thing by them.
That's a good point, actually. It's the album that shows off their influence by the BBC Stereophonic Workshop more than any of the others, I think. And it does sound like it's sort of telegraphed in from an alternative 1970s and maybe sort of soundtracking a slightly sort of a psychedelic sci-fi show from that time, which is why I love it, obviously, because that's all the things that I like. It does sound like you've sort of half tuned into a radio station that is broadcasting from another dimension in another time, and it's and I think that's probably the sound they were going for, and it's incredibly evocative and transporting because of that. It does make you wonder what pictures would go with it, which I like about it a lot.
They'd be a bit sort of color saturated.
Yeah.
Weird, yeah. That's exactly the sort of picture I have of it. Yeah, it's
sort of VHS with the tracking not quite sorted out.
Yeah. Nice. All right, let's give it a listen. This is Boards of Canada. Oh, that was so good. That was so good. And it's almost one of those songs that is too short. And it's all the better for being too short. You know, you want it to carry on for longer, but actually, you know, if it did, it wouldn't be as special. It's clever. It's clever.
A good point. It's a good point. The optimum length of a song. Whereas this one is exactly the opposite. Well, it's not exactly the opposite because I'm happy that this one goes on for 10 minutes. More electronic, and it's Orbital, who we also haven't played enough of. Off my favorite album of theirs, which is Insides, which is the first album which really they just sort of they indulged their ambitions to be soundtrack composers before they'd really done one, and it is the most cinematic album. It's very big. They'd obviously been given a bit of a budget to spend on it, and you can hear it just oozing out of the speakers. And this is the first part of Out There Somewhere, and it's one of those tracks that when it comes on, when it suddenly comes up in shuffle, its introduction just takes your breath away. Just the first chords take your breath away because it's just so sort of enveloping in its sound, and it just builds and morphs and changes in beautiful, lush ways over 10 minutes. And it's a great piece of music. I love that whole album. One of the singles on it is The Box, which is one of my favorite Orbital, if not my favorite Orbital tune. And it's just completely different to anything they've done. So anyway, if you've not heard Insides by Orbital, go and buy it. This is on it. It's a fantastic album.
Agreed. It's my favorite Orbital LP as well. And it's, to me, I was going to say it's the first time that they got into doing this, but for me, it's the only time really that they got into what I would call almost orchestral electronica to me. And there's not an orchestra on it, but to me, there's a sort of level of ambition and, I don't know, it's not necessarily complexity, but sort of ambition and sort of size to the whole thing that blew me away. And I could only liken it to classical music because I'd not heard dance music doing this, and I'd not heard guitar music doing anything like this before. And that's why I love this LP so much. And I agree on the track as well. I mean, this is one of my favorite tracks of theirs. And I think the reason I love it so much is I think the last 2 or 3 minutes of it, because it sort of repeats itself throughout the song, and it sort of builds up, and then they start altering some of the notes towards the end in different bits of the thing, and it just builds up this amazing tune. And they were so clever at doing things like that, of just these subtle changes of just shifting one note, and then it's suddenly this whole piece of music like resolves itself, and you go, oh right, that's what they were aiming to do all the time in the last 8 minutes, and now it's kind of clever. You see, like there's almost like they've revealed the gag at the end of the thing, and it's like, oh yes, it's great. And that stuff sounds so good when
Plot
you're
twist
at a live gig, because you know this bit's going to come where it all kind of makes sense at the end, and there's just this amazing tune that's been unpacked for you. Just ace. It's just ace. One of many reasons why they're one of my favorite things.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, because this is the point when they'd really blown up live, and it does sound like an album that was supposed to be played live because of that. The slight incremental changes that change the entire song along the way, and that allows them to just spin it out without it getting self-indulgent or boring. It just sort of evolves over time. Yeah, it's great.
And it's always a bit of a shame to me that they, I like their stuff since then, but they've never hit the heights of this. No. And I sort of hope that they might have gone in a more interesting way after this, that they almost kind of went back and did more traditional dance stuff after this, whereas they could have gone into some weird, almost sort of pseudo orchestral sort of, electronic. They could have taken it somewhere else, but I don't know where that would have been. It's not up to me where that goes, but I don't know. This is their high point to me.
Yeah, me too. They went a bit nostalgia driven not long after this. Well, the next album after this was quite good, but after that, it was all looking backwards, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's enjoy this one. This is Out There Somewhere, Part 1 by Orbital. You need to kind of lie down and a cup of tea after that, don't you?
I did have a lie down and a cup of tea.
While you were listening.
Whilst I was listening.
It actually probably is. 10 minutes is probably about the right amount of time to have a cup of tea and a lie down. That's another reason why it's the perfect track.
And it's obvious that they're very English because of that. They probably compose the whole thing around how long does it take to drink a cup of tea.
That's a good concept album.
It is.
That's a very good concept album. Yeah. Right. So number 4 for me, what am I going to have? I know I'm going to have Michael Jackson. A bit controversial these days. But still, he's ace. His music is incredible. The Jacksons were amazing. Michael Jackson was amazing. Just extraordinarily talented and made some incredible LPs and brilliant tracks. And if you want to hear, some of the most beautifully produced and put together soul and funk music, just listen to his, I think particularly Off the Wall and Thriller and things like that. They're just awesome records. So the track that I've picked is one of the tracks from Thriller. And I mean, I may have got this wrong, but as far as I'm aware, this was not a single, although pretty much most of the tracks from this LP were. But this is PYT, Pretty Young Thing. And it's an incredibly influential song. And for a lot of people doing dance music or soul and funk music in the decades since, is that a lot of people kind of reference this particular tune in some of the stuff that they've done. And it's kind of odd. It's kind of satisfying to me because it was always the track from that LP that I kind of liked the most and thought was, the funkiest. And it's got this kind of amazing kind of lightness of touch, and it makes you want to dance to it. It's just a brilliant track. So it completely mystifies me why it wasn't a single, because it's just got everything that you would expect in a single. It's just a really big song that people know. You can put it on if you're DJing somewhere and people will jump to the floor on it, and you don't often have that with an album track that people kind of know it, but it's just completely irresistible, I think.
It's funny thing, because this album is so full of songs that everybody knows. It would be easy to imagine that every single one of them was a single, and I think you're right. I don't think this was, but it was just that genius combination of Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones, off this second album. It's no wonder this was the biggest selling album of all time for such a long time, because it was somehow familiar yet completely different. Every track on the album is brilliant, and it's just a shame that it's very difficult to separate the man from the music now. It's almost uncomfortable if you allow yourself to listen to his stuff, but it's such a shame because things like this are a joy. They are pure pop music. They are the epitome of everything that's great about pop music, and everything since has tried to sort of live up to everything on this album and this tune. Really, it's just a shame he ended up being who he was, but there you go.
Anyway, let's enjoy a bit of good Michael. This is PYT.
You make me feel so good inside. I've always wanted a girl just like you. Such a PYT, pretty young thing. Ooh. Where did you come from, baby? And ooh, won't you take me there right away? Won't you, baby? Tender roadie, you've got to be. Spot my need, just sugar fly with me. Don't you know now is the perfect time? We can make it right if the city lights will deny. He's the love
It's a tune.
It is a tune. Of course, it's a tune.
Yes. So, I mean, unbelievably, we've reached our last tunes.
We have.
Yeah. For ages, this one. This is great, the LP tracks. What have you got? What have you saved for number 5?
So, Prince is somebody who, God, it was hard. I could have chosen any number of tunes off any albums. It could have been Baby I'm a Star. It could have been Dance Music, Sex, Romance. It could have been New Position of Parade. It could have been all sorts of things. So I guess really this tune that I've chosen is kind of representing all of Prince's great album tracks, but it's probably one of my favorites. And it is the Ballad of Dorothy Parker off Sign of the Times. And it's because I've chosen this one because it's so completely different to lots of his stuff, most of his stuff, actually. This Sign of the Times is a great album, obviously. It's kind of his Sgt. Pepper. I think it's known as that. And it's full of really choice funk and pop tunes. But the Ballad of Dorothy Parker is just a bit avant-garde and a bit out there, even for him, really, but still has a cohesiveness to it and a story. It's a little bit like Norwegian Wood in a way, because of the story that it tells and the way that it tells it, and the fact that it's it's about him. Well, it's about him hooking up with a woman. Obviously, most of his songs were, but in a particular way. And structurally, it's very weird. It goes off all over the place, but doesn't sound self-indulgent. And it's a great song.
Nice. Well, you can't argue with Prince, and you can't argue with anything really from Sign of the Times. I mean, I think that's the thing about Sign of the Times. I mean, there are so many, as we've said, for most of the ones we've chosen today, there were so many tracks from that you might have as things. I mean, Starfish and Coffee, I know these are it's very, very kind of super poppy and accessible, but I'd almost choose that as well. That's such a great tune. But this is a great one, as you say. It's just a bit different. And he's kind of from his, I guess it's from his Imperial phase, isn't it, really? I would say this. So, yeah, no, love it. Let's stick it on. This is the Ballad of Dorothy Parker by Prince.
Dorothy was a waitress on the promenade. She worked a night shift. Dishwater blonde, tall and fine. She got a lot of chips. Well, earlier I'd been talking stuff in a violent room, fighting with lovers past. I needed someone with a quicker wit than mine. Dorothy was fast. Well, I ordered, let me get a fruit cocktail. I ain't too hungry. Dorothy laughed. She said, sound like a real man to me. You're kinda cute. You wanna take a bath? Do you want a bath? Oh, I said cool. I'm leaving my pants on. Cause I'm kinda going with someone. She said, sound like a real man to me. Mind if I turn on the radio? Oh, my favorite song, she said, and it was Joni singing. Help me, I think I'm born. Phone rang and she said, who ever's calling can't be as cute as you. Right then and there, I knew I was through. Parker was gone. Well, my pants were wet, they came off, but she didn't see the movie because she hadn't read the book first. Instead, she pretended she was blind, and fiction brought home by which much better, so I went back to the filing room. Let me tell you what I did. I took another bubble bath with my pants on a fighting stop. Next time I'll do it sooner. This is a planet of Dorothy Parker. Sweet Dorothy Parker, Dorothy Parker. Well, Dorothy Parker, Dorothy Parker. Well,
There we go. That was Matt's fifth choice, his fifth and final choice on album tracks. So what we've got left, well, I've got my final one. So I said we might return to the Beatles, and we are returning to the Beatles. And in this one, I'm attempting to get away with a very, very cheeky selection. So this is what this is what Beatles fans call the long one. So, this is known as being called the long one. So this is basically most of side 2 of Abbey Road. So from from You Never Give Me Your Money through to the end, and it encompasses Sun King, Mean Mr. Mustard, Polythene Pam, She Came Through the Bathroom Window, Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight.
I think you're cheating.
All of those, and it's basically a medley. And so that's why I'm getting away with it, because it's just, I would say it's probably my favorite, bit of music like that ever. And none of them are singles.
Of course.
And it was all designed to work together as this one piece. And how they did it, I mean, God knows how they did it. I mean, I've read so many books about this stuff and seen so many documentaries about how the Beatles, because, some of these are John Lennon compositions, some of these are Paul McCartney compositions. A lot of them are written completely separately from each other. And so how they managed to segue these things together is just completely beyond me. And you'll hear within the range of tracks that are played, some of the tracks repeating their refrains in the later tracks and coming back to each other. And it's just, the most monumental achievement, I think, of pop music that I've heard. It blows my mind, this one. And I think Abbey Road is my favorite Beatles album. It's probably not the cool thing to say, even though I love all the Beatles albums, particularly things like the White Album and I mean, Sgt. Pepper and all the other ones. But this one is the one that I really come back to, partly probably because my dad had it when we were kids and I used to hear it a lot. But I mean, I can't stop playing this particular sort of set of tunes. I think it's the most, I think I've gone on about how clever it is and how brilliantly conceived it is, but also the tunes are great. You've got things like, Mean Mr. Mustard, which is kind of quite a funky little tune. And you've got Golden Slumbers, which is absolutely beautiful. And then you've got other tracks which are just incredibly funky on there. And you've got these amazing guitar solos and it's just everything seems to happen in about 20 minutes. So yeah, what more can I say?
It's interesting that because we think of the Beatles' experimental period as being Sgt. Pepper. And as we talked about previously, the sort of the recording processes of that, but actually it's just different types of experimentation. It's about sequencing songs and tying things together in a way that is unexpected. I don't know Abbey Road that well, and I should do. I mean, I listen to the Beatles quite a lot, but I don't listen to this one. I don't know why that is. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing this again for the first time in a long time.
Oh, great! No, it's a brilliant thing. Well, we'll leave you with this nice long tune, and we'll say goodbye for this week. We'll be back with more 5 tunes next week. I'm not quite sure what our theme will be, but they will be 10 very good tunes. I'm pretty sure of that. So we'll see you same time, same place next week. And this is the Beatles and The Long One.
You never give me your money. You knows. Such a mean old man. Such a mean old man. His sister Pam works in a shop. She never stops. She's a go-getter. Takes him out to look at the Queen. Only place that he's ever been. Always shouts out something obscene. Such a dirty old man. Dirty old man. Her Majesty's a pretty nice girl, but she doesn't have a lot to say. Her Majesty's a pretty nice girl, but she changes from day to day. I wanna tell her that I love her a lot, but I gotta get a belly full of wine. Her Majesty's a pretty nice girl, someday I'm gonna make her mine, oh yeah, someday I'm gonna make her mine. Well, you should see Polythene Pan. She's so good looking, but she looks like a man. Well, you should see her in drag, dressed in a polythene bag. Yes, you should see Polythene Pan. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Get a dose of air and jackboots and kilts. She's killer diller when she's at the hills. She's the kind of a girl that makes a news of the world. Yet you could say she was attractively built. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great. Fab. Isn't that great? It's real good, that. It's real good. Oh, listen to that now. Oh, look out. She came in through the bathroom window, protected by a silver spoon. But now she sucks her thumb and wonders by the banks of her own lagoon. Didn't anybody tell her? Didn't anybody see? Sunday's on the phone to Monday. Tuesday's on the phone to me. She said she'd always been a dancer. She worked at 15 clubs a day. And though she thought I knew the answer, well, I knew what I could not say. And so I quit the police department and got myself a steady job. And though she tried her best to help me, she could steal, but she could not rob. Didn't anybody tell her? Didn't anybody see? Sunday's on the phone to Monday. Tuesday's on the phone to me. Oh yeah. Once there was a way to get back homeward. Once there was a way to get back home. Sleep, pretty darling, do not cry, and I will sing a lullaby. Golden slumbers fill your eyes. Smile. and I will sing a lullaby. Once there was a way to get back homeward. Once there was a way to get back home. Sleep, pretty darling, do not cry, and I will sing a lullaby.
Radio Lewes. Local community webcasting.